Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, George. I'm so appreciative of you sharing that story. You remain one of my children's favorite teachers here. Yeah, both my kids. Friends, it's been quite a week. I want to start today by just breathing together and to invite you to wrap your arms around yourself. As you breathe in, feel and give yourself a squeeze. Breathe in and breathe out. And feel the kinship and love that you are held in this room. Know that you are not alone. And know that our oneness makes us stronger. You may be feeling anxiety about the coronavirus or sadness about the election results or holding any number of worries and concerns, which we've heard this morning. And it is easy to feel isolated and alone in our fear and our anxiety. That's what fear does. But we need to keep reminding ourselves that we are connected and that we need to keep looking out for one another. I have heard from many of you this past week who reached out to others after last week's sermon, and I'm so grateful that you did that you took that to heart. And we need to keep doing that. It's ever more important to keep reaching out to one another, checking in on each other. I actually considered scrapping this whole sermon and, talking about how do we respond to crises. But for now, the advice about the virus is that, as it has always been, wash your hands, cover your cough and your sneeze, stay home if you're sick, but call the doctor. But also stay connected and respond with compassion and care for one another. And so, because language is a tool of connection, and religious language in particular deepens that connection, I carry on with my original plan. I was quite pleased with myself, actually, when I came up with the title of this sermon months ago, even though I worried that it was no longer relevant. The impetus to talk about religious language comes from conversations and comments over the years about the meaning of certain words and why we use them here in this place, this church. For some reason, while contemplating this sermon, the title of Roald Dahl's book, the BFG, which stands for Big Friendly Giant, popped into my head. I actually didn't read this book as a kid, and I didn't read it with my kids, but I thought that it might have made the right way to describe my understanding of God as a child, a big friendly giant, or an immense and benevolent being, strong and powerful, kind and gentle, even a little playful. I'm a little uncomfortable sharing this, but when I was a kid, I used to look at the sliver new moon, and I imagined that it was God trimming his toenails. Or I'd stare out the window of the car moving along the highway at dusk with the forest flying by, and I'd picture God or a big friendly giant lying down, camouflaged in those trees. There's something about pondering the vastness of God or the universe holding my tiny self that I found then and now both terrifying and comforting. My beliefs have changed with adulthood, but when I am overwhelmed with the particulars of my life, panning out to imagine something much larger than myself still brings me comfort. Language is a powerful creative tool. Krista Tippett, in her book, Becoming Wise, writes, "I take it as an elemental truth of life that words matter. Words take on all of our flaws and frailties. They diminish or embolden the truths they arose to carry." End quote. Language carves neural pathways of complexity into our ever-evolving brains. Words can be limiting, easily misunderstood, misused, and confused. Words can paint a picture, get us what we need, express love and joy. Words can prey on fear, categorize, separate, and incite outrage and panic. Words can cause deep and lasting pain or healing and comfort. Words can describe, name, claim. Words form laws and policies that can liberate or bind. Words make stories, which can open and expand or shut down and close off. Our Unitarian Universalist tradition tends to glorify the written word, but only certain words. There are other words that we sometimes avoid or even malign. There's a real discomfort for many of us with words that have been claimed by more conservative or fundamentalist faiths, words that remain painful reminders of exclusion and shame, which many of us have experienced in our religious upbringings. When we give words power over us rather than claiming and redefining them, we are hampered in our ability to communicate about the things that matter most. In 2003, William Sinkford, then president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, spoke about the need for UUs to embrace a language of reverence. He said, "We need some language that would allow us to capture the possibility of reverence, to name the holy, to talk about human agency in theological terms, the ability of humans to shape and frame our world, guided by what we find to be of ultimate importance." This is religious language, placing us in a larger context, whispering of a larger meaning, and carrying with it implications of how we should live. End quote. Reverend Sinkford urged us to be able to describe what it is we believe as Unitarian Universalists so that we can share those beliefs, not to convert others to our way of thinking, but to be able to more fully inhabit those beliefs and allow them to inform our living, to bridge the real and imagined divides that pull us apart and move us forward on the journey toward wholeness. In theory, the embrace of Unitarian Universalism is wide, making room for different theologies, philosophies, values, and beliefs. In practice, we've struggled to balance and give voice to reason and intellect, as well as mystery and spirit. Language is often abdicated in our secular and political spaces as well. Words like progressive, liberal, socialist are hijacked by those with different values and defined as radical, anti-American, unpatriotic, and other such nonsense. If we're afraid to claim words and define them for ourselves, to write the stories of our own lives, or engage in conversations that illuminate what we really mean when we describe our core values, we empower those with a different agenda to control that narrative and the structures of power. A vocabulary liberated from assumptions can expand the possibilities of finding common cause, building partnerships, and discovering creative solutions. It is possible to cherish the language of reason and reverence. Reverence doesn't have to discount reason. In combination, our minds and our hearts, feelings and intelligence can bring us greater wisdom and more productive communication. We can reclaim an open and expansive religious language, utilizing words like belief, faith, and God, and saying what we mean by them. Claiming and defining these words enables us to better understand who we are, why we're here, and how we want to be with one another on the journey. Exploring a common language and bravely saying what you mean can help build relationships across difference, a powerful and important skill we need to make the world whole. On Friday, I was part of a conversation initiated by Alexis Owens, a graduating student of McCormick Theological Seminary, on the intersection of theology and race. This project is designed to bring congregations and faith leaders together to explore how our theology informs our work to dismantle racism. In this conversation, a Baptist minister and I, with different identities and different theologies, could talk about what God means to us and how our different beliefs lead us both to engage in this work of crossing borders, overturning the structures of oppression, and discovering commonality. It would have been a very different conversation if one of us could not access or define what God means to us. If I had simply said, I don't believe in God, I think it would have stifled what was a rich and meaningful dialogue. What I did say was that my understanding of God is not contained in a being or identity, but in process, in connection, co-creation, and continually unfolding meaning-making. The conversations I have with interfaith colleagues are powerful, and in order to have them, I need to be willing to be vulnerable and speak in the language of reverence. And I would add that Unitarian Universalism has an important role to play in interfaith work, and that interfaith work is essential to living our values and creating justice. And if we can't come to that table with some access to that religious language, we're not playing at the same field. Christian doctrine teaches that Jesus is the incarnation of the Word of God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, says the Gospel of John. Muslims chant the 99 names of God, leaving the 100th to point to the name of God that can never be known. In Jewish tradition, there are many names for the divine which are considered so sacred that they are not to be said out loud or, once written, erased. Understanding how each Christian, Muslim, and Jew may interpret these teachings and concepts of the divine could deepen our understanding of our own lived experience, beliefs, and faith. What might be possible if we were able to talk about our ideas of belief, faith, and God without preconceived notions about what that means for ourselves or others? Could we organize better, create a revolution of mutual empowerment? Could we more intentionally live the values that compel us? We're often arguing with ideas that don't really exist in the minds of others. When someone asks me if I believe in God, I automatically assume that they mean the big friendly giant or the bearded man in the sky. But that's not my God, so why do I think it's theirs? And because these words have so much weight and power, because we attach all kinds of assumptions to these words and what they mean to us and to others, we can't get anywhere near each other to really find out. We can't get near the more important conversation of how those understandings call us to be in the world. When I read the words of people of many faiths, I find a rich tapestry of ideas about sacred and divine power. There's no one right image or understanding, no one perfect thread, but woven together, they co-create a broader and more beautiful meaning. These words by Rabbi Harold M. Schulweis from his poem called Between are precious to me. They capture my understanding of God and remind me how language fills the space between us. He wrote, "God is not in me nor in you, but between us. God is not me or mine, nor you or yours, but ours. God is known not alone, but in relationship, not as a separate, lonely power, but through our kinship, our friendship, through our healing and binding and raising up of each other. To know God is to know others. Love God is to love others. To hear God is to hear others. We can approach the language of reverence and reason in that space between us. Belief is another one of those words that, like God, is often claimed by those with a narrow definition. I take offense to that term non-believer when used to describe me, a non-Christian, non-Muslim, non-Jewish, Unitarian Universalist who believes in all kinds of things. I believe that life has meaning. I believe that cultivating joy and beauty are life-saving and transformative requirements to resistance and revolution. I believe the power of community. I believe in the profound, intimate, and infinite interconnection of all things. I don't believe there's any such thing as a non-believer. We all believe things, and our beliefs inform our actions and our interactions. That is why belief matters. Belief initiates or guides action, or it does nothing, wrote Octavia Butler in The Parable of the Sower. Too often, as Unitarian Universalists, we start describing our faith in terms of what we don't believe. When asked what Unitarian Universalists believe, you might start by saying, well, as a Unitarian Universalist, I believe, ... And Unitarian Universalism embraces a wide spectrum of beliefs about ultimate questions. What unifies us is the values we strive to live by: human dignity and worth, justice, spiritual growth, freedom, and responsibility as we search for truth and meaning. Equity, compassion, democracy, and interconnection. Please don't let anyone decide for you that you don't believe anything, or that your faith tradition says you can believe whatever you want. Please do continue to explore and talk about what it is you believe, remaining open to hearing what others believe and willing to have your beliefs altered. My favorite word of the three is faith, which is different than belief. I understand belief as what our minds and experiences tell us is true and real. Beliefs are harder to move or change. I felt frustrated as a kid in my Catholic upbringing with the message I heard in church that the only way to salvation was to believe in the words we had to say together in unison. I didn't understand how I could make myself believe what I did not. Faith to me is another matter. Faith is what we choose to trust in, even when we may not believe it. Faith is when we decide to act as if, to keep showing up, to keep trying, even when it seems there is no hope. Faith is enacted in faithfulness, aspiring to be our best selves, even though we know we'll miss the mark again and again. Faith is in the words of our covenant and our mission and our principles. It is the way we strive to be with one another as though every person has dignity and worth, even though that is hard to believe sometimes. We continue to work at the love and service that is the spirit of this and the law of this church. We continue to act as if nurturing the human spirit can make the world more whole, even though we haven't gotten there yet. This is how we live out our faith, our trust in life's meaning and purpose, our sacred promise to each other to keep showing up and trying our best, and bringing our broken and bleeding hearts to the altar of humanity and the sacred source of love. Beloved's words matter. In the words of the great Unitarian religious educator Sophia Lyon-Fahs, it matters what we believe. She left us these words, which I invite you to share with me in closing. I'll read the smaller and you'll read the bigger Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Some beliefs are divisive, separating saved from unsaved, friends from enemies. Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction. Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world. May we reclaim the words of belief, faith, and God, and in our courageous exploration of their meaning, may we build deeper and more abiding connection with all those who we share the struggles and joys of living. Amen.